welcome to Ohio Local Taxes for the Non-Ohio Tax Professional, recorded live on September 13th, 2019. No continuing education credit is available for this recording. Information discussed in this program is current as of the recording date. You can download the sample tax returns and other material referenced in today's broadcast at the link on bottom of your screen. This link also appears in the comments section below the link for the YouTube video on replay. This rebroadcast is brought to you in part by our friends at Tax Help Software. Tax Help Software saves you time by downloading and examining IRS transcripts in bulk. Detect IRS notices and examinations up to 6 months in advance with Tax Help Software. Save 10% with discount code MD1099. This rebroadcast is also brought to you in part by CallNQ. Save time by cutting your IRS hold time to 3 minutes or less. Sign up for a 200-minute trial for $19.97 using the link on this screen and discount code JSH. Tax Practice Pro is a continuing education provider for enrolled agents, certified public accountants, attorneys, PTIN holders, and now certified financial planner professionals. View a list of our current live and online programs at www.taxpracticepro.com. Good afternoon. It's 3 p.m. here in New York. Welcome to taxation of Ohio local returns for the non-Ohio tax professional. My name is John Sheeley. This is a Tax Practice Pro production. I am so lucky today to have two of my favorite enrolled agents on with me. Ellie Jones, who is in Cincinnati someplace, and Angela, who is in Guyana. No, what town are you in?
Gahanna, Columbus area.
Okay, Angela Radic. I just know it's near the airport. That's all I know. So why don't you guys give me a quick synopsis? Ellie, you do what and work for who? And
I am an EA and I am a tax apprentice at BQ Tax and Accounting. We have offices in New York and California.
And yet you're in Ohio. I love apprentice. It sounds like she read too many whatchamacallit, Harry Potter novels as a child.
I am in Ravenclaw, so that's not unlikely.
Angela.
Yeah, so I'm the co-owner of Parker's Tax Accounting. I'm a second generation enrolled agent, and I co-own my practice with my mom.
It's awesome. I'm a second generation enrolled agent too, and my mother refused to own anything with me. Very interesting.
Knows you well.
Yeah, she's retired.
She wants to stay in good relationship with you. No offense, Angela. Your mom's awesome. I love her.
Yeah.
So, somewhat unique within the tax code. I'll just tell you a quick story. So, I owned block offices back in the day. I had 5 offices, about 50 associates at the peak of the year. And one of the things we did at block is we always paid interest and penalty on our errors, which was fine to do. But you wanted to avoid errors. One of the errors, though, that every year reared its ugly head, we got these notices from these towns in Ohio, and also this woman named Rita, who used to write and say, so-and-so didn't file a tax return. And sure enough, Rita was right. We did the tax return, and we ended up paying a penalty. So I thought this would be a great conversation to have. So, Ellie, how many taxing authorities are there at the local level in Ohio?
About 614. Yeah, so there's a lot.
We have 2 here in New York, and you do them on your regular state income tax return. But I don't think that's how it works in Ohio, is it?
No. Much more complex here.
Okay, so what happens, Angela? So first of all, who has to file and where do they have to file?
Yeah, so city taxes in the Ohio area, first your taxpayer owes tax to the city where they work. So work tax first. Generally, that is taken out by the employer from the W-2. Most of the time, that is done at the correct withholding rate. So there's no need to file a city tax return for the work city. But then depending on the residence, the taxpayer may owe resident tax. Some resident cities offer full credit or partial credit for tax paid to the work city. Some offer no credit. So when you have an Ohio resident return, the first thing you need to realize is that this taxpayer does not know where they live. And I see that as a joke, but that is the truth. You cannot rely on the mailing address to help you determine where they owe taxes.
So two things here. So first, yes, it's funny because I thought you had better clients than I did. If I asked my clients what school district they live in here, which is something you put in the return, they don't necessarily know if they don't have a kid in school. But your joke is actually a little more serious. So, for example, I might have an address of Columbus, Ohio, but I may not pay tax to Columbus, right?
That is true. So I live in an area called Blacklick, and within Blacklick, you might have people that are technically in a Gahanna tax district, a township with no tax, Columbus tax district, or Reynoldsburg tax district.
So we were talking about this, and Ellie shared the link the other day. There are a couple of downloads. I need to add this before the end. I didn't put the resource screen up, but there is a website you can go to, and then what do you type into that website?
I recommend, in my case, when I'm trying to verify an address, I go to the Ohio Tax Finder, and there's a link in there for a tax district summary. You put in the street address, and if there's an apartment or a lot, you make sure to put that in there. And what it does is it will give you your correct county code for the Schedule A if you're going to be using that. It gives you your school district number and the percentage if you're going to have to pay school district tax. And then it'll give you the correct municipality that you live in.
And is that always true?
It's about 90% accurate.
Yeah, you do need to bear in mind that there is some error rate. So another resource you can use is the county auditor website. Most of the larger counties have websites where you can go and do an address search. The downside is they have trouble with apartments or condominiums, those interior street addresses. The tax finder tends to be a better resource when you're dealing with that type of property. And some of the smaller counties don't have that searchable database feature on their website.
So we were talking the other day, if I get stumped, I can't find the address, who do I call? What do I do?
You can call the city that you think it's in.
Okay.
Many of the cities have a street listing directory on their website. So like, I think I linked to Cincinnati in there. And if you clicked on the Cincinnati link, you will see it says street listings, and you can search by street in there. And if you're still not sure, the tax departments are really helpful. They want to help you get it right. So a quick phone call can help resolve the issue.
So that's the first thing I need to do, is determine where I live.
Yes.
Right. And you said, so once I determine where I live, I have to find out what. Do I mail these returns to one place? Because that would make sense.
Yes, that would make sense, but that's not how it works.
Okay.
You mentioned our wonderful friend Rita.
Right.
So Rita is the regional.
Who's Rita?
Yeah, Rita's the regional income tax agency. They're an independent agency that collects tax on behalf of a number of municipalities. There's also CCA. Ellie, you just told me the other day, and I have forgotten already what that acronym
Central Collection Agency.
Okay. Then there are a number of municipalities that are collecting and administering their own income tax.
So like Cincinnati has 52 distinct neighborhoods with 52 distinct taxing districts, and most of them administer it on their own. So you would need to find their mailing address and their particular tax code.
Man, okay. So I now know where I work. They took the withholding out. I figure out where I live, and then I figure out if I need to file a return where I live. So far, these things assume, though, that I have that I am an employee.
An employee with a W-2.
Yeah.
Right. So let's finish that conversation, I guess, then. So first, I now know where I work, what city. So I determine whether I need a return for that municipality or not. Right. And if
Generally, you don't.
Okay, because the withholding will be right. It'll be for the right town, and I'm done.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Then I need to look and see where the person lives or lived
Mhm.
and determine if there's a tax, do the
Yes.
return based on their income, and
Mhm.
then determine whether they get a credit,
Yes.
Yes.
a half
Mhm.
or none or all. Okay, wow. So I might have to file twice, 2 returns.
If they move during the year,
Oh,
yeah.
if I moved, right? Because you said I don't file
Yes.
only for where I worked because the withholding.
Mhm.
So,
And
okay,
that's actually a good thing for tax planning, just to cut in. If you're in a tax interview and the taxpayer mentions that they're in the process of moving, it's a good opportunity to be like, oh, let's see where you're going to move. Let's see if we need to make any changes to your withholding or estimated tax payments.
so let's talk about that. Somebody who lived in Ohio, forget about the non-residents for a minute. I lived there. They're walking in and saying, "Hi, I lived in Cincinnati, then I lived in Toledo, and at all times I worked in Youngstown. Here's my stuff." They're all doing that, right? No.
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 Okay, so we need to do a good what?
A good interview.
Okay.
So,
And
Yeah.
when you collect their address, then it's, was this your residence for all of this tax year?
so for
Yeah.
the new to me client, I sure want to ask, where did you work? Where did you live? Did any of that change during the year?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we've discussed this the other day. Is it possible that, well, I guess they're always going to withhold the right tax for where I worked. But I know if I live in one state and work in another, sometimes a large employer will take the tax out of both places for me. Does that happen with Ohio
So,
local?
yeah, employers can offer what's known as courtesy withholding, where they would also withhold for the worker's resident location, but they're not required to do so. So that's really going to go on a case by case basis.
Yep.
Got it. But they can sometimes move, you've said?
The business or the employee?
So I'm an employee and I had courtesy withholding for my home jurisdiction.
Mhm.
Mm.
I moved during the year and I forget to tell my employer I moved, which, hey, happens to the best of us. We have people move entire states and forget to tell the employer. What happens then? I've got 3 returns to do, one with a one resident with an overpayment and then my new one with an underpayment, or
That's just two.
Just
Your
2 returns.
first address, second address.
okay.
Mhm.
I
With
want
some of the cities, it can be tricky to get back a refund when you're talking about withholding. Sometimes it requires an additional form that the employer's payroll department signs off on, stating that they did not issue a refund for that over withholding.
you guys were telling me you had cases where you needed an affidavit. Was that what this was for, or no? That was over where people lived.
That's where if people moved and they didn't change their address. So I think the example I talked about was a gentleman who used his ex-wife's home address, but he lived in a different taxing district where he was a tenant. And so we needed an affidavit and a copy of the rental contract in order to prove to the city that he was not in their taxing jurisdiction.
And you eventually won that.
Yeah.
Okay. So far we talked about residents with W-2s, and I think those are the only people I want to ever do.
They're the
So,
easier ones.
so let's talk about the non-resident person. So I mean the part-year resident. So someone lived and worked in Ohio, and they woke up one morning and said, "I got to get out of here." They left. WKRP closed. They packed up. They moved. Um, what happens then? Do I have to tell them that I'm no longer coming, or does Rita bother me? What happens?
In some cities, you should file a move out form and they make it available on their website, or you can call.
Okay.
Yeah, normally there's a place to indicate on the return that it's a final return and the date of move, and then usually when that return gets processed, they'll close out the account at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we were talking about so many other interesting things. So let's talk about no, let's talk about non-resident returns. Sorry, about when I have income other than being an employee.
Mm-hmm.
So what if I'm a contractor? So
Mm.
I'm a lawn and garden guy, a simple guy with a pickup truck, right, and a helper.
Mm-hmm.
Probably pays cash too. And they drive around and they do 50, 70 lawn accounts. What do we need to be concerned about as practitioners with those folks?
So those individuals need to be tracking where they're performing their services. And then based on the number of days out of the year that they are in that location will determine whether they need to file a return for that municipality.
And right now the number is 21 days.
So
It used to be less, but they increased the number of days in the bill that passed a few years ago.
So I want to have a 20-week lawn service and spend a day a week there. But in all seriousness, so I might spend 3 days a week cutting in Cincinnati and 2 days a week cutting in Columbus. They're so far apart that wouldn't make sense. But you would actually sit there and count the days and then determine what income was done in what jurisdiction.
Yep.
If I was over 21 days.
Yeah, typically what we do is then a proration of the profits, net profits.
You would do a 40-60 split for somebody that worked in 2 towns. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the auditors are okay with that?
Usually.
Yeah, I mean, if they do an in-depth audit, they're going to want to see some type of records for that. But yeah, they're fine then with the calculations. You know, another thing to bear in mind is if you've got a real estate agent, as they sell properties, they should be doing a return for the municipality where the property was located.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So now they have the same 21-day issue though?
No, that's just by property, and we typically do the same type of proration then based on the sale price, you know, what they got for that commission, their overall commissions, and use that to develop the percentage that we apply then to net profits.
So if I'm a large broker like Keller Williams or one of these larger franchise systems, so if I have a brokerage, I've got 30, 40 agents. I mean, what if we had sales in like 100 or 150 taxing jurisdictions? The guy who owns the brokerage firm, in theory, is filing 150 returns?
That's a good question. I've not dealt with the brokerage. What we tend to get is the agent, and the agent's received a 1099, and that's what we're using. So then I'm not sure for the brokerage, they probably just file for then their city where they're operating.
Okay.
The business.
Yeah.
It is up to.
Kept a cut. They're not. That's just a question that I just thought of. But okay.
On most business net profit returns, there is a proration and appropriation. I think I'm saying that wrong. Where you have to break up the
apportionment or proration. Yeah.
Yes, apportionment of where your sales come from.
Got it.
So like if you have a store that's located in Cincinnati, but it has locations in Blue Ash and Sharonville, you're able to break out what percentage of your sales is from that. And it's a schedule that's a required attachment.
Okay. So back to this, is there an estimated payment requirement?
Yes.
There is.
Okay. Remind me.
If you owe $200 or more, you're required to pay estimated taxes.
And then otherwise you have an underpayment penalty for not.
Yeah, and Rita especially is very aggressive with the penalties and interest. So you want to avoid owing.
Cincinnati itself is not super aggressive, but some of the smaller cities around here can be.
So I have 2 thoughts. The first one is, before I forget it, what's the story you guys were telling me in the run through the other day when the sheriff's department might come and visit you over your unpaid tax?
That's Ellie's story.
So my guy, the client that I was working with, didn't pay his city tax, and he got 2 notices in the mail saying, you owe this amount, you owe this amount, and he didn't respond. And so what happened is that the city sent a cop to knock on the door and give him a summons, because in this particular city, the rule is if you don't respond to the notice for pay, even if you don't call them to say, hey, I can't pay right now, maybe just pay $50 or something, you have to go to the magistrate for that town. And in this case, he came to us with the summons that he got. We worked with him to get it paid. He went down to the city. He made the payment that day, but then he got hit with a $50 bill later to pay the city back for the cop coming by to knock on his door.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, that I
got a
guess
point.
that's really like any other civil enforcement, right? If they have
Mm.
to serve you, you get stuck paying the fee. So that makes sense. Um, okay, so again, the same question, I guess. If somebody comes in, Angela, new client to you, 1099 for $40,000, that they're a contractor for a huge national landscaping company. What are some of the questions you want to ask that first time client?
Yeah, you'll want to ask how, you know, what have they done to keep track of where they're working, and hopefully they are producing some type of log then that you can use to start to allocate those net profits.
Sounds like a lot of work for a
It can
simple
be.
return. Okay.
Hmm.
And are typically Ohio residents so ingrained because everyone has these taxes that they know to do this, or no? Does the first time business owner give you that glazed look when you say, where did you work?
Yeah, definitely someone that's self-employed for the first time that is dealing with that, owing taxes to multiple municipalities. They're not prepared, and it's a shock to them. I have an acquaintance that's a real estate agent, and her prior tax person did not file any of those municipal tax returns for her, the sales. And I said, that's gonna come back and get you at some point.
Yeah.
So, you know, not even every tax pro is fully aware of all the rules and follows them to the T.
And
Not
sometimes if they're not aware of the area and they don't check the address, like Angela said, the tax pro could be filing in the wrong city. So we had a business that came to us. Their prior accountant was located up in Cleveland, and they were filing W-3 reconciliation forms to Cincinnati, but these guys were actually in a separate jurisdiction of Cincinnati.
have they at least withheld the correct tax?
Well, Cincinnati's 2.1% and this is 1.5%. So there was a lot of cleanup to do. Cincinnati's very generous and they will work, like they worked with us to resolve the situation.
That's good to know
And the
too.
other taxing district too.
So 600 separate returns, two big places to mail them to, but a whole lot of little places. So the our expensive software e-files these, right? So we don't care where they get filed, or do we?
They file some, but not others.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, Rita and
my favorite product, the most common product in America, Drake.
TurboTax.
No, don't you
What?
use Drake? You use Drake, I think, no?
That's a
I'd
good
use
point,
Drake.
Angela.
Sorry, you said most common in America. I'm like that
No,
must be
Yeah.
for practitioners. Sorry.
for practitioners. Yeah, Drake, you know, Drake works really hard to get these city returns right. You know, considering that this really is only impacting residents of Ohio, they put a lot of work into it, but still not 100% correct.
Ooh, though, I want to put well, let's finish the software conversation. Then I forgot we've got returns we were going to look at and talk about for a minute. So, I guess my software, the big ones it'll do the reader returns, it'll do the CCA returns.
Yes.
Okay, what
I mean,
about,
we do UltraTax and they do CCA and RITA for e-filing.
and then do Cleveland, Cincinnati, the big cities are direct file? No.
Cleveland is actually with CCA.
Okay.
I think they'll do Cincinnati e-file. I haven't done one of those yet.
So Columbus does not accept meth. They have a system where you could go on their
Meth, you mean this
meth,
methamphetamine, that narcotic that,
no,
no.
No.
the modernized e-file system.
Oh,
So
I thought you were
they
going all
cannot,
rose and white on me. All right, sorry.
yeah. So they can't accept an e-file from the software. They do have a system where you can go on their website and file, but it requires creating a user account. So our company policy is we don't do that. We won't create an account for a taxpayer and file it on the website. We just give them a paper one to mail in.
I was going to ask you that. It's it's the individual's account, not you as the accountant. I have an account that I can upload and enter. So yeah, I agree with you. I wouldn't want the liability. Actually, it's probably borderline computer trespass / ID theft, right?
Potentially,
Because I'm
yeah.
telling the system that I'm Sam Smith, taxpayer. Yeah. Wow.
Mhm.
no penalty to paper file?
No.
Oh,
But of course, so all your clients come in and sit at the desk?
No.
no.
So let me get, so you've got this extra step then where you didn't come in, you e-filed, you e-signed, because you're not in New York, so Ohio lets you e-sign. Person doesn't come in and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I have to mail you this 5-page thing to sign and mail in. And then you have to throw that in the mail to them.
Yeah, so I'll compile it into one document
Okay.
and I send it through our web portal and
Okay.
tell them
And with
print it
directions.
with all the pages and
Yes.
sign it, mail it in.
You have
And that's
better
important.
clients. You guys have better clients than I do, because if I asked my client, do you have a working computer, printer, internet, toner, and paper? That's like
Mm-hmm.
having the winning lottery numbers. And the bonus is a scanner. Just saying. So
Yeah, I mean, we don't have that for everybody, but in that case, we're generally sending them a folder with their copy of their return and the signature documents, and then we would just have the paper filing in there too.
And it's a boxy return, because not only do you have the return, but you have the W-2 attachment if they're an employee, and then you need to attach the 1040. It used to be the first page, now it's Schedule 1, and then any additional schedules. So if you have a Schedule C, a Schedule E, an E2, K1s, that all has to go to with the return. So it can be a bulky filing.
while we're on that, rentals, I pay tax, or it depends.
Yeah, so you
Yes.
pay tax based on where that property is located.
Okay.
Yes. So if you have like rentals in some cities, you prorate and they give credit.
Yeah, and then you would get credit ideally in your live city.
Depending.
And then now you gave me a surprising statement the other day. So if I have an S corp with pass-through income, who pays the tax?
The S corp.
The S corp.
Corporation does, right? Not on my personal return, not on my personal filing with my W-2 and my rental property.
You pay tax on that K1 income in your residential city where you live.
Okay, got it. Okay, so this is got it.
But the shareholders don't file individual municipal returns for the K1s alone in that city.
Oh, got it. Okay, very good. So Ellie, ultra tax, does most of them? It's hit or miss.
Yeah, they did quite a few of them this year. I actually discovered yesterday working in the return, starting 2 years ago. Angela, I actually believe you went and you spoke to the Ohio legislature about this, about the fact that the Ohio Department of Taxation wanted to have the option to file municipal net profit returns for businesses through the Ohio Business Gateway, which is where you file your sales tax, your commercial activity tax. And it's optional. Actually, a lot of municipalities took that decision to court because the Ohio Constitution specifically says that cities have the right to levy their own tax and administer it. And the reason I think this was okay was because it's optional. You don't have to use the Department of Taxation, because of course they're going to take a percentage of that for administering it. But I discovered yesterday in UltraTax that it will help you file using the OBG. It will do that.
Yeah, same for Drake. I mean, that's the benefit of that decision, is it opened up the door for MEF, the modernized e-filing for those types of returns.
And this was for like what would normally be on a generic city return. So I was pretty surprised that it would help out with that.
Wow. I'm
pleased, obviously really pleased.
Ellie, you used Pro Series the year before.
Mm-hmm.
How did that handle these returns?
You had to print them out.
It did not.
They did not e-file. And they struggled. Now I used Pro Series Basic at the place that I was at, not Professional. Professional might offer this.
Okay.
But Basic, which was, for a lot of the W-2, had a real struggle with the credit, because some cities don't give full credit. So for example, if you live in the city of Cincinnati, but you work in the northern suburb of Sharonville, you would file a Cincinnati return. You report the tax that's paid to Sharonville. Cincinnati can decide whether or not they want to give you full credit for the tax paid to another city. Cincinnati does, so all you owe is the difference. But some cities will say we'll only give credit up to 1%.
And we know this how, by the way, from looking at the form instructions each year?
You can do that, or there's actually a couple resources that are in the resource guide that I think you're going to put up. Columbus maintains a really excellent database. So the link in there, if people click on that, you type in the city that you need to file the return for, it will say what the credit rate is and then how much credit they give to another city. So it's really nice because it's hard to remember all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 30 more seconds here. So, all right. I want to talk about some of these sample returns that we have. So, there we go. And there's Mr. Scott's. All right. So, let's talk, Angela, first about the Cincinnati return. That's where the Scott's guy worked?
No, that's the Columbus return.
Oh, okay. So,
yeah. So if you start by pulling up his W-2.
Yes, ma'am. All right. So here's the thing, and then we bring you the W-2. All right. So here we go. So this is the W-2 for Scott's Miracle-Gro.
Yeah, so what we want to start with is box 5, the Medicare wages and tips. In most all cases, this is going to be the amount that is taxable to the city.
Okay.
And then if you drop down towards the bottom of the W-2, you're going to see state and local tax information. That's where you're going to get information about withholding. So in this case, they are withholding to Marysville. And the withholding rate for Marysville is 1.5%. Now, you can have situations where your client has multiple W-2s and the information is different on each version. You know, if you have situations where they do have courtesy withholding, sometimes that's listed on a separate W-2, or if they're working in multiple cities, that might be listed in multiple W-2s. So if you get several copies, be sure to leaf through those and make sure you're picking up everything you need.
Or maybe if I don't, I want to reconcile my local wages in box 18 back to box 5, or at least get it reasonably close. So if I made,
so ideally box 18 and box 5 should be a match, but that's
right.
not necessarily going to indicate to you whether there was additional city withholding.
Okay, but if I had $40,000 in box 18 and $79,000, I should at least ask the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. If it was 77,000 versus 79, maybe not so much.
It still would be worth inquiring about. Like, are there more pages to your W-2? You know, did you work in multiple places?
Angela, I have a question for you, actually.
Sure.
Do you ever get those W-2s where they don't write the city name, they just put a code number?
Yeah, that's always fun.
I just have or I try to call someone for the company's HR to be like, hey man, what's this? But do you know of a resource or anything? Or is it sort of like you have to ask the guy to find out?
Yeah, I don't see it come up a lot. So I haven't pursued it. Usually we're able to come to some determination. You know, normally if it's a 4-digit number, my curiosity is piqued if maybe it's a school district withholding. But I have seen some funky things written in there that are definitely not school district, and you have to put on your Sherlock Holmes hat and go to work.
Oh man, so here's the return, which is
that's the Cincinnati return.
How do you know? Oh, it does say City of Cincinnati, doesn't it? All right.
So flip back, you had it up. Yeah, here's the Columbus return. So, you know, starting by looking at the top where the address information is, this taxpayer, so he moved to Ohio at the beginning of 2018. He moved from Maryland, and his mailing address is New Albany. So I'm sure if I had said to him, where do you live? He would have said, I live in New Albany. And if I had said, well, what tax district are you in? He would have said New Albany. But in fact, he is in the city of Columbus for tax.
Now that would have been common knowledge for you, or this was because you looked it up because he was a new client?
I always look it up.
Okay.
Yep, 100% of the time, a new client, I am checking their address.
Got it. Smart.
Yeah, so then if you scroll down some, we can get into the calculations. So Columbus is a 2.5% tax, but they do give full credit for the work city withholding. So he just owes 1% on his wages.
Okay.
This particular client had another interesting thing going on. He has a K1 from a partnership. He's in a wedding band, and the
Not a good band.
well, the partnership K1 showed profit, but he has unreimbursed partner expenses that took him to, once you account for the airfare and the mileage and whatever, he's running in the red. So this is an instance where Drake did not pull forward those unreimbursed partner expenses. It didn't come forward automatically. And I placed a call to City of Columbus because it doesn't come up frequently. I didn't have that answer off the top of my head. I called and asked what the policy was, and he said that this information should match the federal Schedule E, page 2. So I made the adjustment to show then there's nothing taxable.
So for the folks at home, UPE or unreimbursed partnership expenses is a above the line deduction you can take directly against your partnership income. This is not for an S corp, only for a 1065, where the partners have a written agreement or they have an unwritten agreement that's tantamount to an agreement because they've just always, the famous, we've always done it this way, right? And then you get an above the line deduction. So you would have two entries on Schedule E, page 2. I made money, $10,000 profit flowing through, 12,000 in this example in expenses on the next line, and the net number is what you're taxed on. Super powerful tool. It's beyond the scope of today, but that's what Angela is talking about, and I think this is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of comments that were made. Some of these folks say that they get a listing from the brokerage firm about where the realtor had closings. That's very helpful. Someone missed the first 12 minutes, but we're going to post this on YouTube. You'll be able to watch it again. So isn't that fabulous? All right, Angela, where did we, where did we show the credit? I forgot.
You don't see it here. You just see that the partnership flow through came in as negative, and then I attached a copy of the Schedule E. I don't have it here, but
no, I meant the credit. You said that I get credit for Marysville.
Oh,
and
yeah, right there in column F.
Yeah. So, okay. So if we look back at his W-2 for a minute, of course, I've got to find that screen, right? I'm not that smart some days. Here it is, behind here. So he paid $1,190 in tax.
Mm-hmm.
And it's your learned opinion that he did not need to file a Marysville return.
Yes.
Because they took out the right amount of withholding. And
Yes.
his only income in Marysville was his job.
Mm-hmm.
So then, look at there, on column F is the $1,190 I paid Marysville.
Mm-hmm.
Despite I'm filing a return for Columbus, where
Yeah.
I live. Wow. Okay. I mean, it stinks. I still got to come up with $793. Now, you were telling me I should have done what?
He should have been paying estimated payments to City of Columbus.
Okay. And you rectified that, of course, moving forward for him.
Yep, I provide vouchers. You know, a lot of people don't want to pay estimates. We can't force them to pay estimates. We can tell them what the consequences are, but I get in the habit of, here are your vouchers. Just try to get into the rhythm of, this is the process, this is how we do things, and, you know, eventually hope that they get tired of paying penalties and interest and start using the vouchers.
There's, beyond the scope today probably, but there's a safe harbor, right? I can pay in 110% or 100% of last year's estimates, or no? I need to be pretty accurate, under $200 to avoid the penalty.
Yeah, I think it's just under that 200.
Okay.
Don't
Okay.
quote me on that.
Right. No, I'm just wondering. Just wondering, from the good service standpoint.
Mhm.
Okay, so you wanted to look at Cincinnati too?
What's nice about Cincinnati is if you scroll down to the second page, John, if you could please, it has worksheet A, which shows the city where employed. It pulls the qualifying wages from box 5. It shows the Cincinnati tax withheld, and this particular client, they worked in 2 different offices. So because they were working in Cincinnati more than 21 days, their employer started withholding. And then the city where mostly employed, Sharonville, that's their tax.
Hey, can I ask a question about the 21 days? Do I get 21 days free, and then at day 22 I start paying, or at day 22 am I completely taxable?
I think it's you don't start until after to day 21.
Okay, so you think I get
Which,
21 days free? Or
yeah, because that would be hard to track, because when the bill went through, which I think was like, I don't know, it was SB5 or HB5, it was back in 2015. The goal was to take the burden off the employers, because many construction companies were saying, because I think it was 5 days then, it was just too much work to have to track their guys being out various days. So the idea was that 3 weeks would be enough time to do enough the
okay,
smaller contracts.
got it. And this is generated by
Ultra tax.
UltraTax, and it pulled all the numbers you said, right? Pulled
Yep.
everything from W2s. So we were
Pulled the
joking.
Schedule C and Schedule E numbers too.
Down here. So we were
Mm-hmm.
joking the other day though on the call. If you look at what percentage of the market does UltraTax have, and then of those UltraTax clients in Ohio, how many Cincinnati returns are they filing? And you say to yourself, gee, for maybe 10,000 returns that they're filing, they do this good a job. Well, why? Because everybody else is paying for it. But it is an interesting thing about the completeness of it. Really is.
I really liked it.
Well, going from doing them basically by hand before, right?
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
so it pulls, line 1 is the qualifying wages. And then it'll add in the other income from Schedule C, E, F, K1, anything else. So you get your total Cincinnati taxable income. And I don't know if people know this, but you're not taxed on adjusted gross income for your cities. It's just your wages and your net profit. So like any deductions on your federal return, like student loan interest and stuff like that, that is not used in calculating your taxable income for a city. So Cincinnati tax is 2.1%. So that's $1,800 here. Cincinnati withheld 114. Box 9C shows total estimates plus other funds that were paid, and they give full credit up to 2.1%. So the credits were $1,343, and this taxpayer owed $483. And then what Cincinnati does is it has this declaration of estimated tax for the next year, where you estimate how much you're going to make, and then divide it by 4, multiply it by 2.1, divide that number by 4, and then use that to add on to your payment. So in this case, this taxpayer would pay the 483, and then their estimated tax due is 500, so an additional $125.
so they want that first payment with the return. They want Q1 with the return.
Yes.
They do. And that's one point about Rita is they have a really nice automated phone system. So you can call in any time of the day and find out what estimated payments the client has on file.
And that's not 9 different security questions. It's pretty much put in your social security number and what did you pay?
Yeah, actually, they've got an option for tax professionals. So you put in your P10, and then from there, you're able to check on multiple clients at once by providing their social and zip code.
Wow, so that you could almost have a staffer do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's no power of attorney, no human interaction, and forgive me, no thinking, right? Punch in their social security number, write down what you hear.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah,
So,
now some of the smaller municipalities, you can obtain information, but they might be limited to very traditional 8 to 5 office hours. So there's no calling late nights, weekends, and getting someone.
Yeah.
that's not very tax professional friendly. Okay. You need to be able to call at midnight. By the way, do you pay property taxes in Ohio?
We do.
On top of this?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And some
Yes, and then
go ahead, Angela. I bet you're going to say it.
I don't know if I was headed down the same road, but we mentioned it at one point. There's also school district taxes based on where you live. So and that has an additional return. So you could be filing a state, your federal, state, city, school district. It's very common to see 4 returns for one client.
You people are kind of un-American. Which brings up the question now. I want to charge an hour of my time for each of these other little returns because they seem to be annoying, especially if they're not the one in my town, right? That I've got to do all these out-of-town returns. But that the reality is that it's kind of built into your pricing, right? We're not going to talk about specific pricing, but it's built into the whatever an Ohio resident is paying you.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, Ohioans expect you're going to come, you're going to do their return, you're going to charge them the fee. They're not going to want to see a surcharge on their return because you had to do the city return. So just build it into whatever pricing that you're offering to that client.
Right. So is it safe to assume, so if I have a new client coming in and without drilling down and annoying them, is it safe to assume there's going to be at least one of these if they lived or worked in Ohio?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Then the second thought would be, there's got to be a relevant, maybe this is sometimes like a Schedule D, like with a realtor, right? Okay, the first 2, 3, 5 of these are included, but when you need 15, hold the phone, we need to talk a little bit. That's not uncommon either, right?
Yeah, that's pretty typical for what we do. So, people move throughout the year. So 2 resident returns, that's fine. We're going to do those. You start getting beyond that, then we need to talk because, your real estate agent that has a dozen city returns, it's going to take time. So that is going to be a higher fee.
Got it. Especially if they're not in the software to roll over. Now, let me, completely unrelated, and if you don't know, that's fine. How many returns does the software handle? Can you have 10 local returns?
Yes.
I've never done more than 2 or 3.
But it does them, right? It'll do 2
Yeah.
or 3?
Yes.
Right. So then
as far as I'm aware, there's no limitation, especially for those municipalities that are using the generic form. You can just one for this one, on and on.
Yep.
Where you start to run into trouble is when you have someone that's dealing with multiple different municipalities that are all being collected by RETA. Then we typically build a spreadsheet outside of the software and run it to get the calculations. That we try to finagle it to get it to flow through, but it doesn't always. I have filed RETA returns where I've filled out just like manually filled out numbers and attached the spreadsheet that shows clearly how I got there because it sometimes gets beyond the scope of what the software can handle.
So speaking of beyond the scope, I'm a fan of people selling prepaid representation services, and I think that local returns and some state returns can kill your profitability because you get a gazillion. New York State, for example, started auditing 2106 returns, or worse, removing it completely and sending you a bill with no audit rights. But we were talking the other day, the 3 of us, how difficult are some of these notices you get from the cities? And I mean, it's typical. Your W-2 wasn't attached. Your math is wrong. I mean,
it's usually your math is wrong. Income wasn't included. I think I said off the record that if you do an amendment where you're increasing your income, you need to follow through and do the same thing with the city, because the city will go to the state who pulls from the IRS, so they can see if you filed an amendment without filing with them. But most of the letters are.
They're going to catch me eventually.
I'm sorry?
I get a CP 2000 for a missed 1099 miscellaneous.
Eventually that's going to flow through. But generally, like Ellie said, most of the city issues are pretty easy to resolve. It's not in depth. What I see most often are people that come in new to us because they've gotten a letter that says, you should have been filing a Columbus return. And they said, oh, well, I was filing a Reynoldsburg return because I have a Reynoldsburg mailing address. And that's probably one of the ones I see the most often.
Okay. And it gets resolved, right? It's a phone call and a letter, or
you do what you have to do. It's usually pretty fast. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned earlier, they're not very stringent about asking for powers of attorney. Usually you just get a question, do you have authorization? And you say yes, and
yes, I'm
you move
authorized.
along.
They
I
just
have
want to help you get
notice a
compliant.
tax return. What do you think, lady? Right? But yeah.
hmm
They're really helpful. Like, I mean, the administrators and the people who work there just want to get you as compliant as possible to stop the letters. So they're going to help you as well, like find out what the issue is and how to resolve it.
Excellent.
Like, you're like, my records are different. And they're like, oh, well, we never actually received the payment.
Yeah, and it can be a little bit different working with Rita because they're an administrator. They
Yeah.
are less likely that through a phone call that they're going to be willing to waive penalties or et cetera, et cetera. It's more common that they would tell you, oh, go back and get in touch with the one person still left in the municipality, and if they okay it, then they'll go back.
Yeah.
Did one of you tell me that working with one of the agencies, sometimes you'd get so far on the phone and then they would say to you, you know what? Write all this down in a letter and send it to me, right?
Oh, yeah, that's me. I
Okay.
was resolving an issue and they were like, all right, well, we're going to take care of it, but write this down and fax it to us and we'll just put it in the file.
Okay. I guess there's something to be said too. These are local people that live where they're collecting the tax. So at the end of the day, they're not as much an anonymous, disgruntled person as they are your neighbor.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
or at least the taxpayer's neighbor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So there was something we wanted to talk about. Oh, you covered the amended returns, I guess.
The thing that you had asked that we haven't is extensions.
Oh, yeah. What about extensions? Like, so the guy that walks in April 10th with all of those stupid, the realtor that I got to do all those little state returns for. Do I get an extension or no?
Yeah, so as of a
Yes.
few years ago, all of the municipalities are required to accept a federal extension. So
Yes.
typically in our office, we do not file a separate municipal city extension unless we are anticipating a balance due and we want them to mail a payment and have that credit posted to the account.
Got it. Wow.
Yep.
Any other thoughts? Ellie, I'm going to need you to resend me that sheet. I couldn't find it in the Facebook feed, and then I'm going to email out to everybody that resource that we were talking about. It's a Word
Oh,
document.
it's in the G docs.
Oh, all right. Was there anything else you guys wanted to say in closing? No?
I don't think so.
I don't think
Okay.
so.
So thank you all for attending today. Even though there's no CE for this, you are going to get a survey at the end. We do appreciate the feedback. It's how I hire people, how we choose these events. If this was a great idea, please tell me. If it was not so much, or we could do something better, let me know. I do intend to leverage my friendship with these poor people and ask them to come back for another topic. But in the meantime, questions or problems, please give me an email or a text or whatever. And thank you guys both very much. I really appreciate it. I really
Welcome.
enjoyed it.
Thank you for inviting
Everyone have
us.
a great weekend. This will be available on YouTube on Monday.
Thank you.